The hot monitor screamed one long, flat note through the trauma bay. A billionaire's daughter lay motionless on the table, declared gun by the hospital's most decorated surgeon. But tucked into the corner, mopping blood off the floor tiles, stood a woman nobody bothered to look at twice. She had buried a name, a career, and a life. Tonight she was about to dig all three back up. Elena Cross kept her head down as she pushed the supply cart through the corridors of Meridian General. Her badge read E. Cross, Patient Care Tech. Her hair was scraped back under a plain surgical cap, her glasses to prescriptions too strong, blurring the edges of a wealth she used to command with total precision. She refilled saline bags. She changed linens. She said yes, doctor, more times in a single shift than she used to say in a year. Nobody at Meridian knew that 3 years ago she was Dr. Elena Vass, the top pediatric cardiac surgeon at Somerset Children's Institute, a woman whose surgical calendar was booked 8 months out and whose hands had saved children as the hospitals had already given up on. Nobody knew that either. It ended the night a batch of counterfeit surgical anticoagulant, quietly approved by a hospital board chasing a supplier kickback, caused a cascade of fatal bleeds on 3 children under her care. She had fled the batch 2 weeks earlier. The email was buried. The blame was not. Facing a criminal negligence charge built entirely on falsified records, she was given a quiet ultimatum by men who never gave her their names: vanish or be destroyed in public. She vanished. The ambulance bay doors slammed open just after 9 p.m., cutting through the dull hum of a slow Thursday shift. Paramedics burst through, shouting over each other, or Eileen in a stretcher sawed through at the edges. Roll over on the parkway. Single vehicle, high speed. We were got one critical, one non-survivable on scene. A paramedic yelled, breathless, chest heaving. Dr. Marcus Bell, chief of surgery, arrived at a Batchsk Kemervriday jag, white coat swinging, hair somehow untouched by the chaos around whom. Bell had 2 framed magazine covers in whose office and 1 framed diploma. Talk to me, he said, already reaching for gloves he hadn't earned the right to wear that night. Adult male, driver, 40s. Multiple fractures, stable vitals, conscious, the paramedic reported. But sir, you need to know who he is. Bell glanced down. Beneath the blood and road garfed, the face was unmistakable. Julian Ashford, founder of Ashford Dynamics, a name that had funded half the urban they were standing in. Get him to trauma 1. I want comedian, I want neuro, I want everyone in that building on whom. Bell barked, already composing tomorrow's headline in his head. Dr. U8, the second paramedic shouted, dragging a smaller stretcher through the doors. Backseat passenger. It is his daughter. 8 years old. Elena froze mid-step, cart handle still in her grip. She turned. The girl on the stretcher was small and grey-lipped, her chest rising in shallow, uneven pulse. The monitor clipped to her finger was throwing numbers that made Elena's stomach drop before her mind had even finished the sentence. Серце crashing, присючаясь 70 over 40 and falling, the paramedic reported. SHS cut a distended abdomen and idontelaric her breath sounds on the left. Bell's eyes flicked between the 2 stretchers, the billionaire father who would match him a headline, and the fading child who could match him a lawsuit. Get her to trauma 2, Bell said finally, already turning back toward the father. Elena stepped forward without thinking, scanning the girl the way she used to scan 100 children a year. Tracheal deviation. Absent breath sounds on one side. Neck veins bulging like rope under skin. Tension pneumothorax, her mind supplied instantly, cold and automatic. Her lung has collapsed and it is crushing her heart from the outside. Nurse, tech, whatever you are, don't just stand there, get me a chest tube tray. Bell snapped at her without looking up. Yes, doctor, Elena murmured, moving fast, eyes never leaving the child. They wheeled the girl into trauma 2. Bell finally turned his attention to her, holding a pen light to her eyes. Pupils sluggish. Abdomen soft, though. Him sinking internal bleed from the sedent, prep her for an X-lap, Bell said, already reaching for his phone to alert the O. Doctor, Elena said quietly, her tracheas shifted right and her neck veins are distended. It might not be her abdomen. Bell turned, irritation flashing across his face. Are you a physician? No, sir. Then let the physicians diagnose the patient. His voice cut through the room like a slammed door. Prep O3. Gem open in her abdomen. Elena bit down on the inside of her cheek until she tasted iron. Every cell in her trained body screamed to grab a needle and decompress that chest herself, right there, in front of everyone. But a needle. Their own hands, on their own bed, would end with handcuffs before it ended with a heartbeat. You're not a surgeon anymore, she told herself. You're nobody. Stay nobody. She hand pushed the stretcher down the hallway, her hands shaking on the rails, her mind replaying a different hospital, a different year, 3 small faces she hadn't been able to save because the truth had been buried faster than she could dig it out. Not this time. Not again. Operating room 3 filled with the low mechanical hiss of monitors and the too casual chatter of a surgical team that had no idea what was actually killing their patient. Elena stood at the instrument table, forced into the role of circulating tech, watching the girl's blood pressure crawl toward a number that had no future in it. Scalpel, Bell said, making a clean line down the child's abdomen. Blood welled, but slow, ordinary, nothing like what a ruptured organ should throw. Bell's confidence cracked half a millimeter. Live res intact. Spleen is fine. Where is this pressure drop even coming from? He muttered, digging deeper into a cavity that held no answers. That's a 48%, the anesthesiologist called out, alarm creeping into his voice. Heart rate is 170. SHS crashing, Dr. Bell. Elena stepped closer to the sterile field, every instinct screaming past the badge she wore. Doctor, it is her chest. Her trachea shifted before we ever got in here. It is attention pneumo, not her abdomen. I told you to keep quiet. Bell snapped, sweat now beading at his hairline. I am the chief of surgery. I know what internal bleeding looks like. For 6 more minutes he searched a cavity with nothing round in it, while 3 centimeters nose, a lung collapsed harder against a heart that had nowhere left to beat. The monitor's rhythm buckled, the sharp green peaks smearing into a shapeless, dying wave. As a code in, the anesthesiologist shouted, starting compressions. They pushed epinephrine. They shocked her once. Nothing. Twice. Nothing. The flatline settled over the room like a held breath that refused to let go. Bell stepped back from the table, pulling his mask down, refusing to meet the shoulder's eyes. That is it. Injuries were too extensive. We did everything medically possible. He glanced at the wall clock instead of the girl. Time of death, 21:16. He strapped his gloves and walked out without another word, already rehearsing what he'd tell the father. The rest of the team drifted out in stunned silence, someone murmuring about paperwork, someone else wiping their eyes on a surgical sleeve. Within moments, Elena stood completely alone with the small, still body of a girl the world had already stopped fighting for. She didn't need a monitor to know what was happening inside that chest. Trapped air had nowhere to go, crushing the heart from the outside until it simply gave up trying. It hadn't stopped because it was broken. It had stopped because it was suffocating. And she had maybe 90 seconds before that became permanent. If you do this, there is no coming back from it, her mind warned. No license, no name, no excuse. They will find out exactly who you are. She looked at the girl's small, still face under the surgical lights and thought of 3 other faces she hadn't been fast enough for. Not again, she said, out loud this time. She lunged for the door, through the internal lock, and ran to the scrub sink, scouring her hands and forearms in seconds instead of minutes. She yanked on sterile gloves without drying, threw a gown over her tech uniform, and returned to the table a different woman entirely. Stay with me, she whispered to the girl, her voice trembling but her sense utterly still. Dr. Elena Voss had come back from wherever Sasha had been hiding. She grabbed a scalpel and found the spades between the ribs on the girl's collapsed side, making one swift, decisive incision. Air hissed out immediately, a violent exhale of pressure that had been building for 10 fatal minutes. She widened the opening with a rapid spreader, the crack of cartilage loud in the empty room, and watched the lung begin, hesitantly, to reinflux. But the hot underneath still wasn't moving on its own. She reached, wrapped her fingers gently but firmly around the small, motionless muscle, and began to squeeze in a slow, deliberate rhythm. 1, 2, 3, squeeze, she murmured. Come on, sweetheart. Sweat slipped into her eyes. Her arms burned. She didn't stop. A fist pounded on the locked door. Who locked this? Someone get security 2 or 3, now. Voices piled up in the hallway, urgent and furious. Elena barely registered them. Her entire world had shrunk to the tissue between her fingers and the seconds ticking away inside out. And then, a touch. Faint, uncertain, like something remembering how to be alive. She held perfectly still, refusing to breathe. A second passed. Then a beat, solitary and strong. Then another. The heart began pumping on. On again, feeling and releasing under her palm with steady, stubborn force. The doors burst open, the lock giving way under security cade's shoulder. Dr. Bell, the anesthesiologist, and 2 officers froze in the doorway, staring at the impossible scene in front of them, a hospital tech standing in a pool of blood, both hands buried in the open chest of a girl who had been declared dead 20 minutes earlier, a heart beating loudly beneath her fingers. The anesthesiologist snapped out of it fast, lunging to the monitor and reconnecting the leads. Numbers bloomed back to life on the screen. Heart rate 92. Pressure is climbing, SHS stabilizing, he stammered, disbelief cracking his voice wide open. What on God's name did you do? Bell shouted, whose face flushing dark red. You cut into my patient. This is assault. This is a felony. Elena didn't flinch. She kept one hand steady inside the child's chest, holding the reinflated lung in place, and looked up at him with an authority her disguise could no longer hide. She wasn't dead, Dr. Bell. She was suffocating from attention pneumothorax, and you spent 10 minutes looking for it in the wrong place, Elena said, calm and cold. Scrabthun. I need this closed and a chest tube placed properly before that lung collapses again. Urea tech. You don't give me orders, Bell spat, even as his eyes betrayed the panic underneath. If you let go, she dies again, in front of everyone, and you'll be the one explaining to Julian Ashford why his daughter died twice in the same building, Elena said flatly. Scrabthun. Now. The mention of the billionaire's name did what nothing else could. Bell threw on a fresh gown with shaking hands and stepped up beside her. Elena guided his hands with brisk, practiced precision until the transfer of control was seamless, then finally stepped back and peeled off her gloves. Get her out of money, Bell growled without looking up. Arrest her. Assault, practicing without a license, whatever sticks. The security officers stepped forward and took Elena by the arms. She didn't resist. She only looked once more at the monitor, steady, strong, alive, before they walked her out. Word moved through the hospital faster than any announcement could. Nurses and orderlies stopped mid-task to watch the quiet supply cart woman being marched through the halls in handcuffs, her uniform soaked in the blood of the most famous child in the city. Meanwhile, in the private recovery suite upstairs, Julian Ashford was waking up. Broken ribs, a concussion, and a mind that hadn't lost an ounce of its sharpness. He pushed the oxygen mask aside and fixed his eyes on the nervous doctor standing at the foot of his bed. "Where's my daughter?" he said. Not a question. A demand. Dr. Bell cleared his throat, choosing his words like a man building a bridge over a canyon. There were complications, Mr. Ashford. Her injuries were severe. Through an unorthodox intervention, her heart was restarted. A success in the pediatric ICU now, stable. Julian's eyes narrowed. He hadn't built an empire by accepting soft language. Unorthodox how, he said, turning to the anesthesiologist hovering near the door. You. Tell me exactly what happened in that room, or I will make sure this hospital never operates on anyone again. The anesthesiologist glanced at Bell, then back at the billionaire, and told him everything. Dr. Bell called it. He left the room. A hospital tech locked the doors, opened her chest but herself, and brought her back with her sense. She saved her, sir. Beles face went the color of the sheets. That woman was unstable. She's in police custody as we speak, he added quickly. Get out, Julian said, his voice dead quiet in a way that was somehow louder than shouting. Mr. Ashford, I really think. I said get out. And get my lawyers on the phone. Find out which precinct they took her to. The room emptied within seconds. The precinct interview room was cold, fluorescent lit, and smelled of old coffee. Elena sat across from a folder she hadn't been allowed to see, staring at the scarred metal table. The detective across from had looked equal parts tired and unsettled. We ran your prints, he said finally, tapping the folder. Took a while, but we got a hit. Dr. Elena Vass, former chief pediatric cardiac surgeon at Somerset Children's. License revoked 3 years ago. Vanished mid federal negligence investigation. You've been hiding in plain sight. Before she could answer, the door swung open hard enough to hit the wall. Julian Ashford stood in the frame, still in a hospital gown under a heavy coat, flanked by 3 lawyers who looked like they built bodies a syllable. Step outside, detective, he said, not even glancing at the officer. One of the lawyers slid a stack of documents across the desk. Federal release order, effective immediately, pending review. I suggest you give us the room. The detective looked at the paperwork, then at Julian's face, and left without another word. Julian sat down slowly across from Elena, studying her for a long moment. They told me a hospital tech cracked my daughter's chest open with her bare hands, he said quietly. Then mad people ran facial recognition against the security footage. Dr. Elena was scrubbing floors at Meridian General. I did what I had to do, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Your daughter was suffocating and the surgeon in charge never found out. I'm not sorry, Mr. Ashford, even if you want to call it assault. I don't call it assault, Julian said. I call it a death. I just came from the ICU. She opened her eyes. She squeezed my hand. Whose voice caught, just slightly, just once. The doctors say because you acted when you did, there's no lasting damage. She's going to be fine. Elena closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, let herself breathe all the weight out. Now let us talk about you, Julian said, leaning forward. A surgeon who vanished during a negligence case that, from what little I read tonight, smells less like negligence and more like a cover-up. And it was a cover-up, Elena said fiercely. I fled a bed supply batch weeks before it killed anyone. They buried the email instead of the batch. I know, Julian said simply. Elena went still. What? A gurpum, tired smile crossed his face. Ashford Dynamics quietly acquired the supplier 6 months ago. Our audit turned up the original safety flags, including yours, and internal messages showing some messages board knew exactly what they were shipping. They let you take the fall to protect a contract. He pulled a folded document from his coat and slid it across the table. I was planning to hand this to federal regulators next week. After tonight, I'm moving that timeline up. This clears your name completely. Elena stared down at the paper, her hands trembling too much to hold it steady. Dr. Bell has already been suspended pending review, Julian continued. Many lawyers made it clear that if he ever touches a scalpel in state again, that footage of him walking out on my daughter goes public. Meridian's board was looking for a new chief of surgery as of about an hour ago. Mr. Ashford, Elena started. I bought the hospital, Julian said flatly, on the drive over here. I'm rebuilding the pediatric cardiac program from scratch, and I need someone to run it. Someone who doesn't wait for permission when a child is dying in front of her. He stood, steadying himself against the table, and looked down at the woman who had spent 3 years erasing herself to survive. It is time to stop hiding, Dr. Vass, he said quietly. My daughter still needs a doctor. What do you say? Elena looked down at her hands, dried blood still traced faintly along her knuckles. It didn't feel like evidence anymore. It felt like proof. I say, she said, a small, real smile finally breaking through, I need to go check on my patient. did this story of hidden brilliance, corporate cover-ups, and one impossible choice keep you holding your breath. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks in the room is the only one who can save it. If you were moved by DR, Elena was and have fight to reclaim the truth, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs a story like this today, and subscribe for more real feeling stories of courage against impossible odds.